So so we firstly welcome and thank you all for coming along today. Really appreciate it. We've got 3 amazing, talented artists joining us today. So they're going to introduce themselves in a bit more detail. But we've got Fred Boile, who is also known as Neue Grafik, Brother Portrait, and Germane Marvel. And we're going to be talking to them about their music, about some of their experiences in making music in London, and we're also going to hear their music as well. So it's really, really exciting, and we're really looking forward to it. So I'll hand on over to Jorge.
Yeah, we really want to do this conversation. We are going to make some focused questions to our guests, but please feel free to intervene. And as well, we are going to open the mic for the audience, but that will come later. First of all, I would love to ask our guests if you can present yourselves and explain a little what you've been doing lately, what's your career highlights, if you like, whatever you want to present yourselves, please.
I'm gonna
Don't be shy.
I mean, I wasn't expecting to introduce myself, so I'm going to let one of you two go first.
Okay, I'll jump in. So I go by Brother Portrait, a writer, artist. It's funny, there's often conversations about bios and how to go about it, and I think I'm in the middle of sort of understanding how to describe myself and my art. But I'm like an artist at the moment. And writing is a primary form, because really for me, I explore poetry, prose, music, and the core fundamental part, even when it comes to musical expression, I think the origin point for me was the word. And so, a writer, and very visually influenced, whether that be film or photography or, memory in the mind's eye. I think that's the starting point for a lot of what I write. And I've been putting out music more proactively, I guess, in dribs and drabs since like 2015 or so, but been writing since young, background in visual art as well. Born in London, of Sierra Leonean heritage and origin, Sierra Leonean. I think I just mine my life and experience and what I live and learn through observation and feeling, and put that into my music. As a child of London, I've grown up with just all sounds of the world, and I think I'm leaning into that range and diversity in what I do. And for example, I love playing with like Neue Grafik, because through a set I get to touch on all of those sides of me. I get to, maybe start a set off with poetry, get into the more bars, and you can see like the hip hop influence in me, some stuff which is more like dancehall inflected, or like garage or grime, or like all the bass continuum sounds I grew up with, and then sometimes we might just get some jazzy and wild with it too. So that's where I end, because there'll be conversation and more of the story can come, but for now that's how I introduce myself in this moment.
Thank you.
Let me jump in. So hi, my artist name is Neue Grafik, and I'm Fred. How to describe myself is a bit complicated right now, but I can say I'm a producer, beat maker. I'm working to be an art director at the moment, to be behind the scene. I'm also an event manager, which came from nowhere, but that's promoter. I also basically I'm an artist. We'll start to be more we'll start to understand what is the business side, which is really new for me, and just coming from the work that I'm doing on the side, because I manage a jam, really supported by Germane Marvel, who is like really my good side man and the person who really helped me to do it well, and I just start to have a team as well around me, but all that is just come from the fact that I was just a big fan of the music that happened into London, especially like the live music, because like my background was more me in my room making beats. And that's also why tonight it's really interesting for me to get my MPC live, because it's me coming back to, you know, the roots of my personal routine. So I come from like this background of like making my music in my house. As you can hear in my voice as well, in my accent, like I'm not from London. I'm French, but I came to London to make my music something like 6 years ago. At the beginning, it was just some back and forth, just to live some big moment in Total Refreshment Center, Steam Down, and all the other great events that you can see in town. And at the end, I was just like, no, I should live here for this guy here, Brother Portrait, for just, you know, the events that you can live here, and also my personal music, because I started with on the electronic side of the music, and bit by bit, so I was just, you know, completely embraced by the live music that I saw in town, because like in London, it was obvious for everybody to fusion all the style of music, exactly as Hadiru said before. It's like people mix the grime with, you know, the garage and the jazz and the broken beat, and you start to show some really weird beats mixing everything, and people are like, oh yeah, okay, cool, let's play it. And in my country, it was not really obvious. So I was attracted by it. I already had this culture. I already had some release as well. Even before to come in the country, I already had some release on Rhythm Section 22A. So I was already accepted, I mean, by labels and by the culture here. So the transitions was really smooth for me. And little by little, like right now, I talk a little bit more about it, because at the beginning I was just a bit, you know, shy and scared to say like, oh, I'm French, but even if like people can hear it. But as I was a producer, I was like, oh, I don't really have to talk, so I can just play my music and people can just appreciate it. So I came in a lot of countries. They're like, oh, I thought you were English, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm French. Like, but right now I'm like, yeah, I can. It's also a part of me. It's also a part of my album. My albums in general, I am talking about my background. So, you know, my last album was dedicated to Adama Traoré, for instance, which is like a man who was killed by the French police in a story really close to right now in London, Chris Kaba, in the United States, what triggered like the Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd story. So I'm like, okay, even if I talk about discrimination, or if I talk about myself, I can also use my background as, you know, not a weakness, but as something we can empower myself. So yeah, I had like all this story, and yeah, long story short, that's who I am. It's like someone would try to conceptualize his music. That's how I feel at the moment. It's like someone would try to paint and conceptualize his music through everything he's doing. So if it's live music with my friends, it has to mean something. If it's me alone in my room, it has to mean something. If it's me calling an artist and be like, okay, let's make some music together, it has to mean something. If I'm the art director of someone, I would love like this person explore themselves. So that's what I try to be, you know, like, yeah, long story short, just be someone who go in the business side, but keeping, you know, like the mentality of an artist and a painter. And it's not every time easy to find the balance, but yeah, I'm really inspired by some people that I see doing that like incredibly well. Especially I'm thinking of Flying Lotus, or the people who are more like on the business side, like Bradley Zero in town. And I'm like, okay, this kind of things, as I have some you know, references, and they're also black, I'm like, okay, it's maybe possible to be one of them. So yeah, that's why I am.
Well, thank you for coming to London and choosing London and
Yeah.
sharing your gifts and talents with us here.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it, what both of you have said, and you know how difficult it is to conceptualize what it means to be an artist as well. But I mean, and we'll see through your work, obviously, the different elements and strands of that, and hopefully we'll get time to show that video as well that you mentioned. yeah, I was fortunate enough to go to one of your events yesterday, which is Origam, which we wanted to talk to you about in a little bit more detail. And Germane, you were the MC, have been the MC at Origam for some time now. So do you want to just tell us how you kind of started working with Neue Grafik and what that role encompasses for you as well?
Sure, yeah. So I think MC is a really good way of describing what I do at Origam and maybe just in general what I do. But I mean, like in the term of the old school sense of the word of like master of ceremonies. Fred and I have had this debate before. I wouldn't call myself a master quite yet, but it's definitely something I want to aspire to. And what I mean by that is basically being first and foremost a facilitator in that space. So even though I'm an artist, it's necessary to put that to the back a little bit and to be a facilitator for all the young people who are coming through in that space and who want to express themselves and want to show what they've got and want to develop on their talents. So I think that's one of the main ways, that's one of the main things that Fred wanted to do by starting Origam. Excuse me. Something that was very important that I saw in the way that Fred was able to set up Origam is that you have Nathan there. Nathan's the owner of the Colour Factory. He's a black guy in Hackney Wick. He's got all these young people. He's created a space in the Colour Factory which is really welcoming for all of his staff, and they already create a family and a community there. So having that basis there is very important. Having a community almost ready to go, and just with those vibes of, coming together and trying to make the best out of what we've got in London, which can be, a difficult place to live. I thought that was, that's something I've noticed, because we all know what living in London is like. It's really difficult, and putting on any event in London has also got that element of difficulty because the spaces need to make money. You might be quiet at first, so they might not make money at first. You might need to sell a lot of drinks. If you sell a lot of drinks and you get a certain type of behavior, then it can take away from other aspects of what Fred was trying to create, which is really fundamental for me. And as we were all saying, and we all agree on, having our meaning means something more. On my profile it says I'm a metamodernist, and by that, as a metamodernist, I believe that art is not just for art's sake. Art cannot just be for art's sake. Art has to be for survival's sakes. And that's what we do by allowing people to come and express themselves and express what they've been going through. They then in turn feel like they have a kind of a resilience. My man brother Portrait is nodding beside me because he knows where I'm coming from with this. You get a resilience to what's going around you if you can express yourself, and with that resilience comes agency. When you've got all those three, that's a fundamental basis of mental well-being, and that's something I got to give props to Stephen Rudder. That's something that we got from Stephen Rudder, working a part of a thing called Hood Mentality, which is to help young black men by using expression, resilience, and agency, and helping people be creative. So once you have that underpinning, and you have a community who's able to invest in providing that for each other, which is what we have at Origam. Young people who have been there before will come forward and say, hey, I want to put my friend forward, and their friend might be shy, and then the whole community will come around and they'll encourage them while they're on stage. They'll show them how to use a mic while they're on stage. Making mistakes is like a fundamental part of the process of what we do, whether it's expressing yourself or whether it's like setting up a night or whether it's running a podcast. It's such a fundamental part of life, which I feel like we're not given the options. So people like Nathan, also Gordon, the owner of Buster Manties, people like this, Alexis as well, man from TRC, all of these people providing these spaces is really important to, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
just have to correct one thing. I didn't want to cut you, but it's Nathaniel.
Thank you. I thought it was Nathaniel. The second time I was like, Nathaniel or Nathan?
Because he hates when we say his name. I did it a few times and he hated it. Say, can I call you Nat? He wasn't, no. Don't do that.
I'm notoriously bad at getting names wrong at Origam. Like, notoriously bad. There's hundreds of people who come through a week, and I don't speak to all of them, but I speak to enough of them to forget people I see every week. And people forgive me for it, but that's part of, like, I try to make a play of it, you know, because it's like, it's me making a mistake, a fundamental mistake on stage, and being covered and being held by the people around me, and that gives people confidence to then come up and, you know, do what they need to do.
Can you explain a little about that, how the jam works? Because Germane, you are also related to Steam Down, and they also had a jam night. How are kind of the characteristics, the differences, for example, between those?
So Steam Down is more of a improvised show. Steam Down is more of an improvised show, less of a jam. So it's more of a closed group of people, still open, still people will come, you know, from across the country or other bands and other people from the musical community. Ori Jam is very much more open. It's something that you wanted right from the beginning, Fred, just to be able to create a space for people to play instruments on stage, but also to come and sing, rap, poetry, whatever. So it's more of a jam. However, in order to, because jams can be messy, right? Like, that's just the connotation that jams have, is just that they're messy. So there does have to be
some rules.
Some kind of, rules, and some kind of, like, making people know that you're not just coming here to, like, give a soliloquy and ignore everything else. You have to listen. You have to, it's still a show. And by knowing that, then you're actually connecting with your audience better, and then, you know, you're progressing. So that's the difference, but yeah.
If I can describe what I wanted to create and what, for me, in the concept it is, because like I'm building another one right now. That's also why I will need to go after a bit earlier than the other people here. But it's because I have another one right now in Jumbi, which is in Peckham. But the basic of the idea of, let's forget the name, the words jam, but the concept of the Ori, which means like head inspiration, and we can translate it by soul in Yoruba. The concept was more like, I want the audience understand they are the main thing. If the frequencies and what we try to give to them will not work if they don't participate, or if they're not involved on what we're doing. And the idea is like, we all have to be connected, exactly like, you know, right now I'm talking, but basically if the audience is talking, or if the audience is like drinking or going somewhere else, or, you know, they're, you know, talking loud about like the experience of yesterday or what they did, and like they don't really care about what we said, basically we're not all connected together. So it was my main idea. Well, the Ori and the concept of the jam and the music around Ori is like how we can be connected all together. What is the things which just, you know, reunite us instead of separate us. So and that's it was the main concept, and that's what I say that a few times when I was on stage. Like the concept is to connect all our souls together, and for me it just means like, I don't want to create a cult. I don't want to be a guru. I don't want like Germane when he's in stage, like, because he tried to facilitate the people to come on stage, or you know, support them when they try to express themselves. I don't want they feel like, oh, we are the gurus, or we try to you know, like take something from you. Basically it's the opposite. It's like what you can bring on the table if we would just do our best to push you to be yourself on stage or in the crowd. And we also have to explain that even when you're in the crowd, you got the responsibility to be a part of it. And all these things like this, it seems to be simple when I describe it, but I can tell you, by experience, it's not simple, because some people just come because they want to, sorry to say that, but shag all the girls, or because they want to drink, because they want to get a good time, because they feel like we are, touch the word, I hope it will continue, but right now we have a certain success on what we are doing, but I love it, but also the issue with that is like people are less and less here for the main concept. You know, when you have 50 people and you explain that and they're all your friends and they really get it, they're like, oh yeah, of course. But when you have 300 people, 350 people, 400 people, even yesterday was a lower night, it was 200 people. It's, for me, it's still, I still don't get it. It's still insane for me, but it works. That's what I'm saying, you know. And I'm like, and I can tell you on the long term, it could drain, you know, our energy. because like you just do your best to bring people and bring them like in your world, and sometimes they naturally don't get it, so it's like how we can keep this energy, but not just for us but for the people who get this service, because that's exactly how I consider what we're doing every Monday. It's like it's not like, again, it's hard to use certain words because like I do my best to be really careful, because like we are, again, like we're not a church, and we don't try to create a church, but we try to get a service. And in my head, I love to be like, okay, people pray without knowing they're praying, because like the prayer basically is just like how you can connect with yourself, how you can connect with other people, and how you can connect with something beyond our understanding, and so for me it was and that's so interesting to have these two guys here, because I know them through the music, but in my personal work I know them, and I try to do that with them in two different ways. With this guy in studio, we were talking about what this word means, why you use these things like this, why you have to put your voice behind, and what does it mean to talk about you're running on the flame, to talk about the grief, and how we can move on after one of our brother or one of our friends pass away. And with this guy, we are literally every Monday like trying to push the young people to come on stage and be, give them the best of themselves, and try to create a crowd like close to what we are trying to do, and both for different perspective, of like really draining on the at the end of the day for two different reasons, and yeah, it's two person that I really appreciate and also admire, if I'm honest with you. So yeah, that's what all remains.
I just want to touch on, if I can, this energy, because it's something that not a lot of people know. Like, I'm sure, like, as organizers of this space, you guys know that there's an energy that we give out, and like the more successful the thing is, the bigger it is, the more people you reach, the more energy you have to give, because it's not like you're portioning a piece of yourself out to each person. You're giving exactly the same amount to each person, and while yesterday, yesterday was a great night, and so I feel energized spiritually, I feel good. I am very tired, my work is to go out and party, and it's not as glamorous as it sounds. It's a job, and our economy is set up in such a way that it doesn't really value that, the community, what we provide for a community, in that we like together with the help of everyone else, we've helped not just create a community out of origin, but we've also helped create communities within that has been able to spread off of young people. These are like young people who like are doing naughty things. Some of them are doing naughty things. But they want to make something of their lives. They understand by coming and getting this service, they'll be able to express themselves more. They'll be able to open up more to their friends. So there are people who are going through some serious vulnerable issues, and they've got a community around them that can cater for them. And we're doing this, and really that's what we would have hoped in the past for our governments to do, and whatever. So I just think it's an interesting dynamic of how the economy isn't quite, it's a mismatch of what's going on, what's needed, and what's actually being provided.
Yeah, and I got a sense for that yesterday. I mean, I was there by myself, but literally as soon as I'd walked in, like, a guy come up to me and was like, "It's good music, right? Good vibes." Like, straight away. And I was just like, I really got a sense for it. Like, even if you don't know anyone there, like, people are just in that environment where, yeah, they just want to have a great time and be there and feel that energy. And yeah, maybe in the future, you'll see me up on stage.
I just want to say, as a concept from the traditional jam session that we have discussed before in this series of conferences and all that, it's not like you are going to see the musicians. It's like the people, the audience is part of the event, and it's without that, it's not. It would be not Origam or whatever you're trying to create. So I think you're successful on that.
But that's why I'm saying, like, at the moment I try to create another one, and we were able to do it like this because of the space as well. So yeah, big shout out to Nathaniel. But the space is big. We have a lot of like place for having like 2 or 3 horns and like 2 or 3 vocals. and at the same time it's a drummer, and sometimes you have Namali behind who play the drum machine or someone else, you know. So, and during this time I play the keyboard, and we have a so just the basic group is 7 people. And we call more people on stage, so we can be 9, 10th, and you still have someone. We constantly ask like go out the stage, but actually we can have like 10, 11, 12 people on stage. So the space allow that. But for instance, like I'm creating another session in Jumbi at the moment. It's smaller, it's a terrace. When it will, I think quite soon we'll go inside, and it's less space, less people. I think it doesn't make sense to have a drum kit. It doesn't, you know, it makes sense to have too much musicians. And I'm like, how I can manage that without having a big turnover will make it differently. So this one is a bit, for now, maybe I will change the formula. I'm still, you know, it's the beginning. We started it three weeks ago. And I'm still thinking like, okay, what is the best things to do for this one? So what I try to say is like every space also have different needs, you know, and with what you want to share with people. So this space, in my opinion, is more, you know, it's easier for me, and it's easier to think about it as an open mic, because the space is like, okay, if we keep the same vein behind, we can support in a better way the vocals. In the Ori Jam, how we did it, it was like, okay, we have a lot of space. It's literally a warehouse and a club. So let's even when it was upstairs, like when we have a little bit less space, it was still really open. And I was like, okay, maybe we can do it like this. Maybe it will make sense to do it like this. And quickly we were like, okay, if we don't get some rules, or if we don't do it in a certain way, it will be chaotic. So yeah, you know, like, in my opinion, I don't think that's why we were successful, if I'm honest with you. I think it's more the mentality behind it. And I also think, yes, people can go there like, I can be a part of it, I can be on stage, I can have my moment of glory. And I think, I don't know if it's the best way to see it. And even when people come on stage, we do our best to explain to them, like, you have to be a part of the whole thing, because like if you want to have your moment, you will not be able to hear what happened around you. So it's kind of hard to actually find the perfect balance. I think we do it like better and better every time, but we're telling you, it's still not something that really simple. It's still something that we constantly update. And if tomorrow I will be able to. Because I was thinking like, oh, maybe we can go in festivals. Maybe we can, do it outside, or we can have like last year we did it in Fabric, and I'm like, oh, maybe we can have a one-off here and there for some special events, or for something, specific for, I don't know, maybe Black History Month or our birthday or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, if we do it somewhere else, it will be another story. We'll do it again differently, and that's my opinion. The most important on what we are doing is the energy and how we can share this energy. And also, I never hide it. Like if I work with Germane Marvel, it's also because I saw him in Steam Down, and the way Steam Down share the energy. You say that before, like it's not really open. But the way they share the energy, the what you feel in your body, the way you're connected with the musician on stage, and the way they build the show week after week. These things just inspired me a lot for the last 5 years, and it was infused in everything in my personal music. Benji Appiah is not here right now, but this drummer just inspired me so many tracks even before he was in my band. I was already really inspired by what I heard from his drums. So all I try to say is like the most important in my opinion, and which make the difference with the musicians all around the world and the musicians from London and from this scene is the energy, is how they can bring you into their world, and that's what you can feel. Forget the jams. That's why you can feel on the album of Shabaka Hutchkins or Sons of Kemet, on Nubaya Garcia, on Theon Cross, on so many musicians who got these things where they don't try to be hype. I don't think so. Some try, but it's not the main things we hear. It's like, whoa, you hear the last album of, I don't know, Moses Boyd, and you hear like Strands and Then Fiction, and you hear the work behind, but you also hear the soul of the person. And I think that's really what makes the difference. They don't try to play jazz. They don't try to be someone different. They just express themselves, like really and truly themselves. And from what I heard from long time ago, from Running on the Flame, from like the personal project, or all the poets and like Mamoyo, or like I have so many names to say, but from Altis scene, Altis people who deeply inspired me, and I know I also inspired some of them with my mentality. I think that's what we try to do, is just like how we can share our energy, how we can be ourselves, and like, you know, having. I think we are at the beginning of what we are doing. I took for myself, I'm at the beginning of what I'm doing, and I was observing a lot. But I think it's literally legacy. It's like how we can give to people and have something after, you know, our passage here. So I know it's deep, I'm sorry, like, but it's literally how I feel the music, you know, and my passion for it.
Well, we definitely love to have you back at SOAS, and to do more, and potentially. I mean, we had the jam session with Steam Down, which was last 2 weeks ago. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of recap the two events as well, just so that people know, because we've got musicians that are here that might want to come along to one of the sessions. So Ori East is every Monday, which is 8 p.m. Until 12 a.m. and that's at the Colour Factory in Hackney. And then the new event is in every Tuesday at Jumbie Peckham.
Yeah,
that's correct. 8 till 12 as well. So if you want to check out those events, like, do come down. So should we play some music now?
Okay.
Are you guys ready to go? Awesome.
YouTube?
So hip hop things, or a bit, but do you want something experimental at 130 or something at 90 BPM?
What did you want? We'll see. There's time, because even if you just touch this, I can take some.
We are experimenting in many ways here. We don't have a vocal mic, so we have to sing to the mic, but you are gonna, you know, experiment the a cappella thing.
Okay, so 146.
Brushes with death, fam's had more than a few. Mouthfuls and morsels, one of us mortals can chew. Tasked by immortals, do what I'm ordered to do. Success gladdens many, saddens and tortures a few. Painted by the most high, numbers, all we do is serve. At the fork in the road, ahead of the curve, all we do is swerve. From the long game, one foot in the earth, but one with the birth. Found talk, word cheap, had the nerve to observe. Still trying to find the words, I chat shit, it's fertile. Foot in the door in the quest for coin, I'm jumping turnstiles. Playing the long game, every inch is worth miles. Holding back the tears for years, man, I earned smiles. Melanated melancholy, mingled with confliction. More time of consequence of confidence, conviction. Double down on destiny and the duty to this diction. Expression, resilience, agency. If it ain't all free, don't play with me. Fuckery and fakery.
no vacancy. Hard dough, daily bread is spreading out the bakery. My God collects checks, I ain't like partaking these. Steady with the faith, she ain't forsaking me. When others start shivering, we receive deliverance. Magical and militant, radical and brilliant. After dark diligence, one man army. No enemy can touch me, my energy is calming. Put harm into charming, selective touch of Midas. Never been a pacifist, I kill them with a kindness. Spiritual activist, repping the most highness. Protected by the timeless, respected by the finest. Known for mathematics, pull the plus out of the minus. The black is never black. What I do right now is focus. Wasting time, but all is not hopeless. Bridges made from passive days. Life is testing, but this is game from. Each second, trying to pass. Question my master, but I'm not talking. Put it on, my heart's dark, but my head is strong. I'm lost in the dark, and I'm dead and gone. Every mistake that we make is never wrong. As we keep learning, as a medicine, as medicine, which is down better than like sediment. Full mind development, chocolate melanin. Can you see the chocolate melanin? The opposite of your heroin on heroin. I'm not a hero, take a zero. Setting fire to the back like Nero. I'm a mirage, not a science hero. It's made over the to the Nero. I'm on mind, so I think out the box. Don't put me in the box, come on, come on, stuck in the grind, holy God, love the rest of the constant prices. Hope we got that better in this room. Germane Marvel.
We could go for like hours though.
That's it.
Amazing.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, you want me to
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about that song and like where that come from and yeah.
Alright, so you kind of heard a song and a half. So the first two verses are of a track that are going to come out soon. It's called Hold Your Head Up. And it is a song about facing existential crises. That's putting it lightly. Yeah. It's a song about facing existential crises and knowing that you can keep going, kind of like crying because you know you mean to go on kind of thing, as opposed to because you want to give up, if you know what I mean. So that's what that one's about. And the second half was kind of like some old bars I wrote back when I was in uni a long time ago, coming out as well very soon. A long time ago, and yeah, this one guy said to me, "Oh, you could do anything you want, Germane. You just need to focus." And I think he was talking about Galdem, but his words resonated with me in a very specific way, you know, because I recently found out, oversharing, that I'm neurodivergent and autistic and ADHD, you know. So it's like I got two sides of me want to do different things. Stimulus, chill, you know. Yeah. So it's about learning to harness that and to put it in a direction which will uplift my life, leave a legacy, and make my younger self proud, basically.
Awesome. That's great. Amazing. And how long have you been making music for?
I was fortunate enough to be classically trained as a pianist when I was like under 10. I kind of stopped that after a bit, at my teen years and that, you know. Yeah, so I've been writing bars since I was about 15, but reading and writing poetry from younger than that. So yeah.
Amazing. So yeah, so we're gonna talk to you guys now about the collaboration that you worked on. You mentioned it at the beginning as well, called Running on a Flame, and yeah, we just wanted to sort of, firstly, introduce you both. Again, obviously, Brother Portrait, as an artist collaborating with Neue Grafik. And you collaborated with British Algerian director. You've collaborated with British Algerian director Nadira Amani, Touch and Bass, and obviously most recently with Neue Grafik. So yeah, do you want to just like give us a little bit of insight into the meaning behind that song, and then yeah, just talk about how that came together as a production as well.
Behind the song for itself, I think I prefer like Hadiru's talking because he's literally the writer.
Oh.
Yeah, well, Fred started talking on it a little bit and touched on the origins of the theme for the album, and what kind of ideas we wanted to talk about. We've been collaborating since the first round of his project Fordham Road Part 1, and that collaboration was very much us just in conversation and thinking on space and location, namely the Total Refreshment Centre in Stoke Newington. This time round, I guess the story sort of evolved, and he sent me this instrumental called For Ahmed Arbery.
Yeah.
And it was really, we were, I guess it was like October, I think, 2020. So things had kind of settled from the Black Square moment and the summer of Black Lives Matter. And I think a lot of us were maybe reflecting on a certain exhaustion, especially because it was like a return of a cycle, you know. I was really wondering on my silence primarily around like the July time, and this sense that I felt this urge or urgency or duty to be saying something out into the world. And I remember being in the bath one day and just feeling and thinking, but I said it. I've like said it, and I can remember like times in the past, like whether it was 4 years before that, 5 years through growing up, where I've been having these conversations, expressing this, learning, teaching in myself, and feeling these emotions that in that moment had kind of left me down and paralyzed, but in the past were part of whether my activism, my music. It's a time when, like, if you see me on stage, it was just all rage, you know, like it was just black rage the whole time. I was in a band called Black Other. All of our content was about that kind of stuff too. So this time I found myself in a much more kind of like quiet place and thinking on grief and heaviness and how to kind of journey and travel through grief and heaviness. And to do it in a way which was also, beautiful and tender and just as honest as I could be. And I think in general in our collaboration, we just leave a lot of space for ourselves to be that way. One of my favorite songs that we have is dedicated to Mary Paul, which is on the first project. And, you know, even from that title, Mary Paul being like his younger sister, it's this idea of putting out a message for the generation below and someone to come. And, you know, that too is it's a black radical's tale. It's a black radical story. It's me like moving through the day, just stepping outside, walking down the street, meeting people, and going to a place, a kind of like convergence, a gathering where we can all kind of come and connect together. And this one too, I think I wanted to be again in conversation, but really in conversation with people that were mourning, and to talk to them, and to also like just be honest with the feeling and the legacy of grief in whichever ways that manifests. And that legacy of grief can manifest in a way which is a galvanizing force, and it gets people on the street, and it gets people learning, and it gets people burning shit down and doing all the necessary and good stuff, to talk truth to power and to bring power down. But it also is, it's just lots of nights crying in the bath. It's just lots of tiredness. It's kind of losing people to the experience of grief as well, losing people to depression. So I think a lot of that swell of emotion was kind of in me, and it was a slow write actually. It was a slow write, and it was a heavy write because I was just trying to be concise and communicate all that I felt in the context of that, and imagining Ahmed running, and running still, but this time like running free, and for his for that memory to be a burning light. And whether that's a light that illuminates people's darkness, or a light, like I said, that galvanizes and is a touch fire to something that can, you know, burn Babylon or whatever. Like, it's a light that's still out there. So, hence the running on the flame as the title. That's as best as
Thank you so much for the introduction and the courage to put that into your work as well. We're gonna play the video now so you guys can see the film.
Yo. Yo, man, wake up.
Here, man, here. Oh, go on. There. I don't know what's going on there, fam, but I do not like the look of that. I beg we just turn around and take the long way. Yo. Yo.
Listen, I don't know, man, but just let's have a look.
Debris settled from the blast of rage. Body built back from a scribble in ash. Now the black gold gilded the lonesome grey. See a man in the mirror of a certain age. Certain man did never make it this far. Give thanks and praise. Here we are. In love and rage, here we are. Mine been a medley of men. Been a garrison for demons, cacophony of long lost friends on return to forgotten ends. Findings had them treason, them wiles and whens. Betray them essence, hollow in presence. Puff chest but ain't nothing but air when I'm here. Air when I'm here, just air. Ring a cipher, a share is for to practice care. Like, what if man up was a hand up? Let me hold you till the suffer suffocate and the beast we kill. What if? Memories still running on a flame. Beloved, if they ever come again, leave them low and looking ashy where they stand. Your tail feathers and wingspan beating against the pain. Rise, rise, majestic in skies, guardian to our hearts as we try. When us here living, feeling spent, and through that empty still gotta make rent. Lift us to ease as we cry, as we breathe. Between you and me, this hope brought a hardship to needs. Put a fist in their palms, let they march under feet. Was a voice ripped hoarse, resignation, disbelief, blind rage, all the stages of grief. Evening time bloodied the horizon. Clouds bruised purple and sirens had us all with hearts in our throats. Under tongues a well of promises and prayers for our yoke, like we free to be. May our children's children never have to pray to no white God for protection on their way. Never hide inside from somebody else's fear, forced to bend words to a disregarding ear. Let us know now and never once forget. We the seeds of survival, so honor and respect all life givers through our living and our joy. Rage against a bad heart and Babylon destroyed.
Powerful.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, really incredible. I've seen it a bunch of times now. Seeing it on the big screen as well.
It's actually the
well
first
done.
time I think I see it personally on the big screen as well.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, nice. And we'll share a link to the video as well. So if anyone wants to look at it again or share it with people, please do. Thank you. So sort of by the portrait, sort of thinking about your career in music as well, and how you first got started. I know that one of your early albums, which was called Navigate in Limbo, is that correct?
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's an amazing album, and you described it as sort of everyday tales from Limbo Land, home to a first generation boy feeling neither fully here nor fully there, and I mean for me it was a beautiful insight into a life between different worlds, of which I can relate to. Felt like a lot of revelations and a lot of self-growth in there as well. So tell us a little bit about that album and how you first kind of started working on that.
I think it's actually interesting. I was at Film Africa on the weekend, and someone asked a question about the films there, and the fact that they asked if the films. Well, the fact the films all kind of had a sense of liminality within them, a sense of in-betweenness, and if the person thought that was an inevitable product of African cinema and black cinema and diaspora cinema or art, and the person answering was just saying that that's just an inherent and fundamental part of existence or our existence in that sense. And the title came from being around a friend's house who I was in a jam session with, and somebody described themselves as a resident of Limbo Land, essentially, as not being fully either where their country of origin was or where they found themselves now. And I think I very much related to that. Being fortunate enough to I'm from Sierra Leone originally, and being fortunate enough to go back and forth quite a lot when I was young, because my mum wanted us to kind of maintain that connection as much as possible. I did start to already feel that sense of distance of okay, I'm comfortable here, I'm at home here, but there's a part of me which there's a dissonance or a kind of I don't fully fit into the puzzle piece, And then same in London, growing up in 90s Lambeth, I was that Benetton generation, multicultural London, all in the soup together, and I really saw that. Obviously I could also see certain of my friends had racist dads and whatnot, and that was it wasn't a full on pretty picture, but in terms of like my school, my upbringing, my life, I was in and amongst people of all sorts of backgrounds, colours and creeds, and I saw it as a line, you know, as like a level and equal line, which is beautiful. But I think as I grew older, I also saw some of the negative externalities and impacts of that in time. And primarily, I think I was reacting to what was lost in assimilation and what was lost in saying that what was lost in leveling out, essentially, and erasing the difference, and that difference also being identity and who you are. And the sense that, you know, I have friends who've grown up with me my whole life that saw me as a Londoner more than, or only saw me as a Londoner, for example, and had an assumption that everything they saw of me outside of the house was all that I was, and that didn't know that when I walked through the door, it was Sierra Leone, you know? And like on a Saturday, I was going to a Lakey, I was going to an Arabic school, or if I'll be in like, you know, Peckham and walk through a hall party, and it would just be like being on the corner in Freetown. And so trying to communicate that reality that I also had a responsibility for shielding and kind of like not fully exposing to, and an anxiety about. And I have other people as well from different backgrounds that have a similar anxiety of like mixing all of these different parts of themselves, you know, together. So yeah, I think in that time I was realizing that some of my writing was touching on that kind of question, and the journey through that, and hence the navigate also, you know, that it's a passage and a journey through that, and one that I'm still living and learning, and one that I'm still discovering more about. Because, for example, like I touched on, say, a backlash against the sense of assimilation, but then I also came to appreciate the sacrifices my parents and their generation had for us in our education, also that like they wanted us to assimilate for our safety and our care, and also, you know, because of what they experienced when they first came to the country, and they didn't want us to go through the same things. And so really working on our own interests and doing the best that they could as young people in a new environment, like not even knowing if they could go back home. Like I got to the same age that my parents were in some of these memories and moments I was exploring in my music, and I was just like, like a certain level of like compassion and understanding that, you know, it's not always easy to actually get there, and there's still frustrations that I feel with them, but a level of kind of like understanding, and also sadness actually, because I was just like sad for them having to have go through that. Sad for them having to be, I would not like, I know I was a dutiful and good, no, I wasn't an ungrateful kid at all, but like sad for, in a sense, like them not, the struggle of their like dreams, and also the mourning that they had to also wrestle with. Like I said, the fact that they weren't necessarily going to go back. Sierra Leone went through a civil war, and my parents were here whilst their community was being ravished by civil war, where their grandparents are having to like be smuggled out of the country. And I was too young to fully deep that, and I was probably like coddled from it to a degree too, but then reflecting and being like, oh, so whilst all this other stuff that I was cognizant of was happening, they were also like on the phone trying to figure out like what was happening, or like soldiers are in town, this, that and the third. So you just kind of get to a certain level of like, yeah, that journey through Limberland is actually still growing and expanding and getting more and more complex, but at the time those were the main things that I was thinking on and exploring, sort of memories around the age of like 10 and 11, and yeah, Lambeth and around me since then. Yeah.
Can I just say, unbeknownst to him, this exploration of liminality and everything you're describing now is what I would say would make you a metamodernist musician for me, because that is what metamodernism is always all meant to be about, is the exploring in between modernism and postmodernism, in between being black and also being white in a sense, because we grew up in a white culture, so we understand, we internalize all of that, and so that, number one, for me, that's quite important, but also it's quite groundbreaking for me to hear you talk about your experience in the film festival, because I've been saying for a long time in metamodern circles, amongst the academics that, this is very much present in black culture, it's very much rooted in black culture, and the response is not really, it comes from the most high complex societies, which obviously are the Nordic societies, which is what they see, So to hear you say that, thank you very much, my brother. Yeah.
Blessings.
And were you able to go back to Sierra Leone as well? And how's that kind of journey been for you as well?
So I think I didn't go for like 10 years, like when I was, from around like 10 to 20 odd. And then since then I've managed to go back quite a few times. Unfortunately, I was actually able to go back twice I went in 2018 and 2019. And I went back to do music, which was just beautiful and a blessing. And actually, it was for the first time that I felt, okay, there's a bridge that I can. No, okay, it was a bridge that was in front of me essentially. That through my creativity, through my mind and ideas, I could find different homes in Sierra Leone and Freetown that I hadn't necessarily seen before. And because I was going there and the second time around, I was performing at Freetown Music Festival. And so even one of my aunts called up my mum, just being like, I just heard Hadri's name on the radio, and that level of just like translation, because even in London, like when I've been doing music and creativity and arts things, it's like, having family, parents and expectations that want something of you, I've always looked for that translation. So when it's like, okay, I've got some Arts Council funding for this art project, or this is on the BBC, or we're at Glastonbury, it's like things which they've transcended. They can translate your experience and your success to your elders or your family who are just like, what are you doing with yourself? And so even just like one of my aunts like hearing me on radio in Freetown and being able to call and then translate that, and I felt a level of comfort for that side of me which I've never really felt before in Sierra Leone. And a lot of experiences I just couldn't translate, because some of the years I was going before, I was like living in warehouses, doing up warehouses with friends, or doing like jams in squats and anarchist organising, all this stuff, and just things which didn't also have a kind of like social political equivalent in Sierra Leone or a context. And so it was hard to like communicate and translate my experience. And I felt that when I was really comfortable in Freetown, I was also somebody that I wasn't fully content with. But in recent years and on recent visits, I've been able to get closer to that. But frequency helps, and I haven't been back since like 2019, and already I'm starting to feel like a little bit of that distance again. Yeah. But it's the most beautiful country in the world, no bias.
We're just getting close to the end of the evening. But before going to some maybe questions from the audience, we would love if maybe you two can give us a little more music.
91.
I had my taken comp, Mary Paul.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, because it's not my.
Just
spin it. Okay.
So we'll do a version of a song called Dedicated to Mary Paul.
Use your microphone.
My axis tilt on a maximum lilt, smooth as butter on silk. This wave is best served with a hood up brag round, hair nappy that a soft brush hold down. That day the mood was carpe go, with the flow follow sound stroke wind blow. Moose said run up on the fanfare to reason on how best to move through the season, cause we done talk but ain't eating. We done talk but ain't eating. Might run from the top. We done talk but ain't eating. I'm gonna run it back because I just like it like that. My axis lilt on a maximum tilt, smooth as butter on silk. This wave is best served with a hood up brag round, hair nappy that is soft brush hold down. That day the mood was carpe go, with the flow full of sunstroke wind blow. Moose said run up on the fanfare to reason on how best to move through the season, cause we done told but ain't eating. How we acting, how they treating we, all's fair if fair and square, but they move to constrict our circle C. And how we roll is each one teach, quench first, sharing abundance feast. Get the Betty then split that bag,
come in love and leave in peace. Know our worth, so if we must talk price they pay for every road us lot paved, every trend and fashion, style and pattern from the day man first scratched cave. Took our customs and made them preserves of the gentry, had centuries keep us out till centuries later. Compared bodies and doubt, we were all bare balling and bloody on entry. Tricksters took over history books, but true mami wata no better. Before I know it no get any me, I'm picking sensory wata no to pepe, ha. Remorseless, moves with a cleansing streak, find lesson in the havoc she wreak. A little leak might steer the course, if not by tender touch, I boom by force and flood. They fear rivers of blood, but not that the sky might cry. Appealing to an angel's grace, but what if the birds stop fly? Could be from space we come, but you can't draw breath on high. If then, why not now? If times must change, so too must I. If times must change, so too must I guess. Thank you, that's that.
Maybe an open question for you three, just to wrap up the conversation. I wanted to ask you about genres, because in the last 10 years, I think the boundaries are kind of falling down, and people is, as you say, at some point, people just expressing themselves, no matter what is the genre. Or if the music is called jazz or not, what it is, who judge that? Any thoughts on that, on how people is now expressing themselves?
I would love to reply.
Let me just give a quick meta-modern take, and I'm going to let you guys talk. Quick meta-modern take. One of the principles of meta-modernism, the structure of logic which it is founded on, is both and. Especially in Western societies, we focus a lot on dichotomous thinking. Not so much in, for instance, Indian societies, Southeast Asian societies. It's a little bit different, but Western societies, dichotomous. And so we're very used to saying this is hip-hop or it's funk or it's, and at the moment, that's the problem, that's the crisis we're in. To get out of it, we use diunital thinking, and it's just both and. So that's my opinion.
My opinion is also why I moved in London as well. I think it's in the DNA of the UK culture. When you analyze a bit, like if you step back a little bit and you see the history of the ska, if you see the history of the grime, if you like, in disorder, but if you see like how the acid music came, or like even like the rock bands like Blur, which and as the derivate to Gorillaz, the tree pop music, and that's the thing. It's like I was compared, as I also come from another culture. That's also interesting for me, because when you compare the two cultures, I'm like, I can say in the UK you have something like 30 genres, subgenres coming just from the culture, and from the mix from, the Jamaican culture with the rock music, which was already here, but already like imported from the United States, and even like today with the drill, the UK drill, like it's something new and fresh, and I can even talk to you about the beginning of the grime music, which was Wiley, who just literally did what happened right now for the 10 years. He did a track called What You Call It, and during the time he was creating the grime music, he asked, what you call it? How do you call it? Urban music? Do you call it two-step? Like, what is it? And he asking to you the question during the time is literally creating the genre. And I think it's really representative of how the people live the music here. It's like before any hype or before anything, before you have a label coming and stamping, we are doing that. People are already creating the music. And I think that's why a lot of genres are just coming from jam sessions, or the broken beat as well. I can say so many genres, and I can say that because I come from another culture, and I compared, and I was like in France, like how many genres we created, and I asked that to a lot of friends, and first every time create like a big debates. Everybody hates me at the end because I'm like, no, because they are like, oh, the French touch, and I'm like, yeah, it's house music with a filter, but basically it's coming from Chicago, and you can't really say it's a genre for itself, you know. And even if I forgive this point, I'm like, okay, let's say French did the French touch once, which is for me more like a label who came and say like, oh, this is French, so let's say it's French touch, more than what I feel deep down with the grime of Wiley and Dizzy Rascal and all these people. If in France, if you want to see some new genres or some genres like really, really French, that's the thing, you have to go outside of Paris and outside of the main square, like, you know, the main country. Like, you have to go in islands and you will discover the Guoka music, the zouk, you know, like stuff derivate you have some derivate like from the dancehall back in the days. I forget the name of this genre, but you have like a few coming from islands. And more traditional, so like, you know, even the zouk, it was created by Kassav, which is a band led by François Desvarieux, and this guy was recognized for his job in the autobiography of Miles Davis, who said like that's one of the most important genres from the black culture. But in France, like, is, you know, you have a lot of negative for me connotations, like is the things you play for the weddings to see like the booty dancing, like, you know, the booty of the, you know, the people on dancing and touching each other, and I'm like, it's not really serious there, you know. And I think if we go deeper than that, I think it's coming from the way people integrate the black culture in the UK. I'm not saying it's perfect, but if I compare with my own culture, I'm like, here, it's recognized. You know, it's like in the 50s, people already had like a good connotation behind the reggae music. Obviously, you have some people who say like, oh, it's the music of people smoking some joints and, you know, with dreadlocks and completely high and like having bad connotations. But at the end of the day, you had Bob Marley and you had like, you know, a lot of shops talking about this music, a lot of white and black people just listening to this music, and from that you had the dub, you know, the dub references, and from the dub references you had the dubstep coming from Mala and Digital Mystics, and like, and all I'm saying is like this culture was strong, and even when you listen to some trip hop music, you already feel how like the mix of all the culture create naturally genres. And I think it's something so deep here in the DNA of the artist and in the culture that they even don't realize they got it. It's just like, oh, yeah, let's do it. And it's so natural, and so, you know, I click so much with that because like in my head, like, you can talk about metamodernism. For me, it's also a way to not be pigeonholed in a genre, and it's so important for me, especially today, to just try to explore and experiment, because like we're also in a society where if we can, it's easier actually, like, you know, if we can say like, oh, this guy do this and you do it really well and you just spend your entire time to make this genre perfectly, it will work. It can work for you, but in my opinion it's a bit you know, encased. Like, you know, you will be this guy who did this genre at this period. And the issue for me with that today is everybody try to labelize things to make it mainstream and to be able to sell it easily. But if you are a bit more subtle, and if you try to navigate in between different genres, and even like trying to create things, I think you can be a bit more, you know, like you can just take time to really analyze every genre and try to see like what you like, and people will just be attracted by you for the concept of what you try to do. And I think it's a bit, obviously, when you think the music like that, obviously it's a bit more like a niche, because you constantly try to experiment and to push your own boundaries. You know, you constantly try to see like what is interesting in this artist or this artist, and you don't care if they're white, black, if they come from India or everywhere else. At the end, you're yourself and you have your own history. But in terms of elements that you try to take, you're like, you know, again, like I see what we are doing, especially like these two artists, but the majority of the artists I'm in collaboration with at the moment, I see it as a painting. Again, it's like, oh, this person know how to rap but discover how to sing. The way they sing could be interesting to develop, to be able to say their own story, you know, because they're maybe a bit more weak on it on one side than another, you know, and you're like, this weakness can be explored, you know, or you know, this rhythm can be explored, can say this, or can, you know, and in terms of collaboration, if I do these things with this artist, it can mean this thing. And so all that for me is just colors, you know, and you can, artistically, just open the doors, you know. You're maybe a bit less mainstream that the, you know, Madonna track or Dua Lipa or something like this. But at the end of the day, you're still like, okay, I continue to explore and I still have something to say. And it's maybe not the most mainstream way to think the music, but that's why I love London, because especially in this context here, it makes sense and people can get the hype for it. And that's the thing that I feel really interesting, because like everybody else, it could be complicated. I'm not saying I haven't been in a lot of different countries, but I'm like, when I see the way they make music in the United States or the way they make music in France or in Germany, they even like don't every time get what happened here. They, you know, some artists adapt their sound to be able to get the you know, the US market. But I'm like, what happened here, like deep down in the artists that this place create, even on the mainstream industry, when I think about Björk, she's not from here, but a big part of her culture was in London. FK Twigs, Semfa, James Blake. You feel like even on the mainstream industry, a lot of artists are, you know, pigeonholed as like pop artists. But when you listen to what they're doing, you're like, fuck, that's not, it's not exactly pop, you know, it's something else. And I think it's really a characteristic of what happened into London. It's like, you know, people who grew up like in Indian areas, but who come with Sierra Leone background, or for Kamal Williams with like, you know, Asian background and stuff like that, and trying to get all their stuff together and try to understand where they're coming from and what they're attracted by, and naturally create like a big, you know, big mix of everything. And yeah, so I think that's it.
Yeah, that's what you were just touching on then, is where the only thing I was going to add on that, which I think is also like a unique manifestation of like the like migration, immigration experience of England, really, in the UK in particular, and as a consequence of empire and that Black Atlantic triangle. You know, I think it just has that triangle from like Western Central Africa to the States and Caribbean, Southern America, back to England and around again. I think just like the movement around that triangle, and sometimes it can literally be traced in the sense of melodies or drum patterns and the evolution of it, and it's just happening in both directions. And I feel like that experience of the movements of peoples in that way, and then also the modern manifestation of, like you said, the way that London is as a city, and these different kind of like communities, even if they're a little segregated, maybe all their kids go to school together, or like, you know, there's an overlap. You can be like, cool, I'm in East London and I'm playing like a day part with Bhangra drums and realizing that, oh, okay, these like sped up soul things or jungle rhythms kind of work with that, and then you get Apache Indian, or, you know what I mean? It's like, I think it's a very much as I said, it's a consequence, a positive result of all of those movements of people and the movements of sound and melody and memory with those people.
I'm obviously like really I have a lot of contradiction in my mind when we're talking about the positivity of that. I had the same conversation with a woman in France who told me like, oh, but you see the consequence of the colony and what happened. I actually create like so much great artists and so much great music, and I had like.
Now, despite it's a consequence. Despite.
Despite. But I'm still a bit sweating when I'm like, yo, and I'm conflicted. I'm internally conflicted. I just finished on that. I don't want to talk too much, but I recently had to model for a friend of mine, and we had this conversation. I didn't know how to take it because you make a lot of research on the history of Africa and the colonizations and the different type of integrations between like two big empires like France and the UK and how both work and and at the end of the day I'm talking right now with you, but at this point it was the same. I saw this guy, incredible designer and drummer, traveling everywhere, Manny from Sierra Leone, like traveling everywhere. We start to make music together, and went to this beautiful gallery in Tottenham Court, and also owned by a black person. So, and I saw like all this, in my opinion and in my eyes, like successful black people who call me, who have like a really great jam working well at the moment, and I'm like, and you're like, if you can see that, oh, you see, you're talking about all these things, but actually, it's for the benefits of your, of your culture, and it's something that I'm still conflicting. It's still something that I try to sort in my own head, because I'm like, can I really see it as a, is it because it's working well for me that I represent like the struggle and like all this year of like suffering and all these nuances and all these differences between like, the slave, the ancestry and the slavery in the United States, or like what happened in the islands, still in the Caribbean islands and French Caribbean islands still today. You had like so many crazy things happening with the way they cultivate bananas and stuff like that. Like you had some people who had cancers. You still have some people who are still working for the ex-masters of like black people still working for the ex-masters of the when they were slave, like when their grandparents or grandparents were slave, and you see like the history of the Beke and the history of the genocide in Congo, or and you make the research of like where you're coming from, and you're like, can I consider all that was for the benefits of my own success? It's a really hard. It's a really hard statement, because you just realize like, oh, you're also like black people today, and the black people who go in uni or who study or who talk like we are talking. I'm still thinking like we are the results, but also a part of a problem, like which is like really beyond us, and that's a really complex subject, and that's not, it's not possible. Like for me, it's really hard to. I make a certain type of music which is a mix between so many things, and I'm attracted by some people really like clever, smart, who can talk, and I have some thrills when I hear these people talking, and I'm so happy to make music with these people, and they exist. And I'm the same time I'm like, am I the result of a biggest problem? And that's really hard, because when you start to think like that, you're like, the problem is like the issue is maybe bigger than black or white, or like colony, or the problem is maybe bigger than yourself, and it's something that I'm still, we talk a lot with Germane and another guy called Jamir in the jam session about this subject, and I think even when I'm talking with these guys, like, we still don't really get the answers. We just, we just talk about it and try to understand what happened and how we are as, the result and black people into society. But you have so many nuances on this subject.
I think it's interesting because you touched on assimilation earlier, and you were talking about the differences in like expression, black expression in say like France and in London and I guess London and Bristol in particular, the places we're talking about in UK, and then how it is in America. I always think it's interesting to look at that difference of expression and then look back at the differences in the application of colonialism back then. So for instance, UK, we kind of put everything offshore. It was very much offshore. Nothing was, we didn't have many slaves over here. Everything was out of the public eye and kind of brushed under the carpet. America, it was right there in your face. There was no real, as much as they wanted to try segregation, there was no real segregation. In France, however, very different. You have stamps of black people's decapitated heads going in public. So it's almost like America in that kind of brutality, very much in your face, but it was also kind of offshore as well. And so this ability to have a culture of silence around black people, for example, for the French, meant that they could then, when black people eventually came to French shores, the assimilation that was required to get on in society would have been higher. You know what I'm saying? So from my perspective, and you can tell me, but my perspective is that being a working class black person in France is probably worse than it is in the UK. Just from the way that Haiti is treated to this day, for instance, it's just disgraceful, and so then the level of assimilation that is asked for when people talk about integration, if you're being asked to assimilate or not exist, the dichotomous, either you're here or you're not, either you're us or you're not, that means that you are then not able to, the black people in that society aren't able to reap some of the benefits from more from Western civilization, you know what I'm saying? And then you're not able to, because let's look at it here, yeah? Us three, we are quite privileged. Do you know what I'm saying? When it comes to being black people, black men, we're quite privileged. We're educated, we're successful, we're talented, we're in the right places, we've got the resources that we need, you know what I'm saying? It's not the same for a lot of other people. And it's because we've been given that. It's because my mum would make sure I was classically trained, because your mum made sure you got your education, do you know what I'm saying? Because our parents and our families have done what we've done and sustained us in such a way, it means that we're able to take what we see, put it together in a different way, and, and make something new from it. So when you're given that opportunity, say in a place like London, where you even though we are still marginalised, it's not as bad as other places, Yeah. And with those degrees of freedom, that enables you to create something new. And in the end, all we're doing is like trying to survive this kind of brutal othering from a culture that is like saying, you can't be part of this. So even if for example, with metamodernism, if I want to contribute to metamodernism, anything I say will be taken under, who's this black dreadlock guy with, talking in this accent, speaking and writing in a way I don't really understand, I'm sure women in the audience will know exactly what this is like, only to hear your words being parroted by someone who fits the archetype of what it is to be a metamodernist or an academic or, or a professional. So we're getting this from the outside world, we're getting all of this, you aren't as good as you think you are. You're not as human as we are, essentially. You're not as valuable as we are. And internally we need to build a resonance of what we actually really are, and can be, and our full potential. And once we have that, I feel, we're able to grow in ways which are, and create new things, and which are, which can contribute and tell the story that we are living, and spread it to other people, and then allow them to, tell their own story in a similar way and resonate with that, which is kind of similar but a bit different,
Can I ask a question on that assimilation topic as well? Because I'm quite curious in relation to writing and speech, and how assimilation, the English language, French language, whatever language it is obviously not necessarily it's not the mother tongue. So how do you go about finding that voice with which to speak that has that elements? And I think in terms of, there's obviously rhythm, there's obviously tonality and things like that. But yeah, I'm just curious to know like how that plays out for you guys.
I have not recently, it has always been there. I have a lot of voices. You heard one there. I can do that those same flows in a different voice. I was brought up thinking my mum spoke Queen's English, and my friends would come round and, you know, she's got a Jamaican accent, you know? But in my head, that doesn't exist until very recently. And I guess as a Jamaican, especially back then, I'm a bit more fortunate than, say, someone from the African continent, someone from Sierra Leone or Nigeria, in that Jamaican expression was already being involved in street, you know, in what they call street language. I don't know what the vernacular, Black British vernacular, shall we call it? Yeah. So in a way, I was lucky. However, singing and stuff like that wasn't really encouraged when I was growing up. You know, it wasn't masculine as enough. You know, so in my journey to find my voice, it means finding my femininity as well, which is, I think, is very important as an artist. It needs to be done, especially if as we come into positions of power as artists. But that's another story which does need to be touched on, but another story. But yeah, so for me, it's about finding my expressions. For instance, we all grew up with American TV, and so why is it so strange if we sometimes talk with an American accent? And we do that, you know, in play and in fun. So why are we constrained? An expression is an expression is an expression. So why cannot we express ourselves? But then the music industry doesn't like that, because you need to be in a certain box. So if I go, for example, Kid Cudi had to do a indie album. He couldn't do, you know, he couldn't mix it up, you know? So yeah.
Some of what you're saying towards the end there, I feel like for me, I'm in that stage where just language is just fair game. It's up for grabs. It's up for plunder. It's not owned by anybody. And I think growing up, you get that sense of like received English, the Queen's English, which again is like, it's a top-down English. And I'm someone also who's got many voices through the different schooling, the workplaces I've been in, the certain environments, and sometimes those voices are fighting and in conflict in me. I've come from like the office to the studio and just been vexed that I can't get out of my work voice in a certain setting. But yeah, there's a sense for me that like now I just want to disrupt that, because if I believe there's like an elevated language, it's really a sense that the lower you are on the pyramid, the more people you have to be able to like translate and understand and translate yourself through. Whereas those same people who are communicating with, the higher they get up the pyramid, the less the more closed their ears become, and the less able they are to hear and listen to anything in a language which isn't the one that they perceive to be the received or the standard in the country. And that happens on a class level or racial level, it happens in a regional level, you know what I mean? It's even a decade or whatever since you're getting like northern presenters on BBC or something like that. So like it happens on all of those kind of places. So I think I'm at a stage where I like the idea that language is alive, it's living, it's evolving. The English we speak now is a result of that evolution and a result of the presence of migrants and the like, and similar. The language I've heard growing up in Sierra Leone, and for me, I'm already aware that in certain settings my syntax is going to shift, and I love to bring in the tone or the syntax or the kind of like the heart of expression in Creole or in Sierra Leonean, the main language in Sierra Leone, and bring that into how I write and express myself in English, because again, two people can be speaking the same language but really not communicating with the same essence, or you know what I mean. So for me, it's more of it's an experiment now, and whether it's in poetry or rap, especially rap is like easier, but in poetry too, it's just nice to bring that into my poetics and throw all expectations or rules out. Let the language be mine as much as I want.
Can I ask Brother Portrait a question?
Yeah.
So like your flows and like your lyrics and that, they're quite unique, innit? They're like almost mesmerizing. And I'm wondering, the main question is where do you find your flows from, bro? And I'm also wondering if it's because you have another language and do patterns from, sorry, what do you speak in Sierra Leone?
Creole. Well, lots of
Creole.
languages, but
Yeah.
Creole is the main one.
So do patterns from Creole inform your flows, or like, yeah?
Yeah, certainly so. I would say like slightly, it's that dancehall has a big influence. What I love about dancehall too is the commitment to form. That, like, again, lots of rappers are really good at that, but like, if you want to break down the like structure of lots of like dancehall artists or certain rhythms and certain things, there's like a real commitment to form and certain patterns of speech and a consistency of that through verses while maintaining like a narrative whole. And so I love that side of things. So I think a lot of that is internalized, and yeah, similar like Creole, because it's because of they're not the same language. Like Creole and sort of like the common, I guess if I was to say like a Jamaican patois or a Caribbean patois, the common thing that would come to mind, there's lots of like similarities in those languages and in the language structure, so I could understand that from birth as well. And it's interesting to see the shifts in invitations, like unu in Jamaica is una in Creole or whatever, and also the presence of other like languages. So I think there's been that, and reggae and dancehall was really big in Sierra Leone growing up too, so that's a sound that I had as a kind of constant through my time. And then otherwise, I'm just a sponge for all the other things. I'm a sponge for jungle, I'm a sponge for garage, and hip hop, and the range and breadth of hip hop. And then really the first songs I wrote were like guitar songs and folk songs though, so it's kind of like lyrical rhythms and patterns from, I've stole things from, sampled from from like Leonard Cohen, Tom Waits, Bob Dylan, in terms of their structures and certain like rhythms and patterns. And I used to always, early bars and in my jam session day, shop floor days, like always had like lyrical lifts and references to like to Bob Dylan in there and stuff. So for me it's just a kind of real soup of everything, sometimes to the point where I've forgotten what I've internalized, and I'll be listening to a song and just be like, oh rah, that's there. On a hip hop level though, Black Thought probably there's a lot of that, a lot of Black Thought, a lot of Jest, a lot of Roots Maneuver, a lot of Yasin Bey, that when I listen to some of the old stuff I'm like, okay, I got that from there. And I just say it's the same way musically that, we were listening to the solo at the end of Running on a Flame, and if you go to a jazz jam, I've been at jazz jams and somebody might say, okay, that person's at second year at Trinity, because they could they know like, okay, you're studying this person and I can hear it in your playing. And I love to wear my influences on my sleeve. I love if someone can listen to a verse and be like, okay, President T, D-double, even if it's like half a bar, like if someone can hear that and be like, Black Thought, Jest, I'm just like, cool, you saw what I did there. So, and it's the same way that if you're gonna hear a virtuoso piano and you're like, it's just 3 notes, but those 3 notes came from Thelonious Monk, and someone 50 years down the line can hear that. And I love to put that into my rap, and just embody it with all of that, because it's supreme, man. It's musically supreme. What some of, even still listen to Dizzy and stuff, like some of the stuff that he did. President T, I mean, it's just like he's virtuoso. Like it's impossible stuff. Like, so you got to pay homage to that really in the lyrics. So I don't know. Short answer, everything. it's all in there, and making new from it.
I told you he's a metamodernist.
I just have to say that before I need to go in a like quite short moment. Like I think I need to go right now, but I just have to say like just for the short story, like Brother Portrait was one of my big crush when I came to London, because we met each other in a house of a friend, and when you meet someone and you feel the energy, like, oh wow, like you have like a really great chat. I don't remember what we were talking about, but we just had, I think we were talking about artists and how it is to be an artist today. I remember like the first chat we had, and the next day was in Steam Down, and I just realized that, oh, he's an artist. And a friend of mine, I went to a house of a friend of mine. I was, like I came to London, I had nowhere to go, so I was just, sleeping in the couch of a friend. And I remember Clara, like, I was like, yo, I met this guy in a jam session, and he's so cool. Like, I really appreciate him, and yo, he's so talented. And she was like, oh, and I said his name, like his real name, Hajiru, and it was like, oh, Brother Portrait. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, have you seen his video? Like, I was like, which one? And she showed me the video you did with Nadira, I think Nadira. And I saw this video, and I was like, is an incredible artist, and you know, it's like you have a crush from the personality to like from the beginning to the end. And I really like the way I discover his music, because it was like really personal, and we were already on the same wavelengths, even like before to listen to the music of each other, and we had like a lot of, I will not talk about personal life and stuff like that, but we had just a lot of moments and a lot of momentum like at the same time, so we're really on the same wavelength. And when I just learned a lot, just listen to his lyrics, or you know, explaining like, yo, I really want to find a good way to paint this idea. I'm thinking about Dalston Junction. When we did Dalston Junction, he was just like listening to me and was like, okay, and he was just write something down, and like the next moment, like he created this entire world of like this guy going back to to, you know, like he was imagining like, oh, I come back to somewhere and everything changed around me, and it was a way for him to describe the feeling of the gentrification. And it's this kind of idea, you're like, it's just brilliant. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't even do that in French or in any other languages. So I was just like, it's just the way, you know, the brain of the person works, the way he turned the ideas, the way he talk about grief. And I think that's also why it's one of the biggest collaboration for me that I had, because it's not based on, you know, a manager was like, oh, you should work with this person. It's more like we met each other and we had like a deep connection and a really deep level. And every time we were talking, all the track we did, we have one track called Black that we will, I hope, release quite soon. It has to be on a various artist compilations, but it's not my release, so you know, we will see. But just this track exists, and we composed it during the time we did Running on the Flame and all this period, and it's just like the different way to explore how to be black and how to talk about the legacy, how to talk about gentrification, how to talk. It's like find different angles and find different ways to talk about one subject. And me, as a big fan of Flying Lotus, you know, Dorian Concept, or all these people would try to explore, you know, the sound. It's also interesting every time it's really challenging as well, because like he got an incredible flow and really like a monotonous voice. And it's like how to explore that, how to change the perspective, how to, you know, like push one word, or, you know, and if you pay attention on Running on the Flame, behind just his voice is like a lot of little details. Like we worked together on it. We did like so many takes to get, you know, like sometimes it's just a rhythm or an interpretation, or sometimes it's like me behind trying to push one word outside of the mix, and it's a lot of details. And also I grew up with English and French rap from my childhood. Like I was born and raised almost with the, you know, in the rap industry. And yeah, it's like a specific way to approach the hip hop. And in my opinion, you didn't say his name, but you really remind me of Doom, you know. So like in your way to rap and your way to approach subjects, and it's just really interesting. Like I mean, like, you know, you have the poetry, but you also have the personality of the person behind it, and yeah, it's just really inspiring. I've tried. I'm not the best, but I try to write poetry as well sometimes, and that's so cool to be, you know, be able to be inspired by my friends. Like I hear Germane constantly. I hear we don't talk too much about her, but Mamoyo for me is one of the biggest artists from London, and is someone so underestimated at the moment. She should be one of the biggest artists here. And Brother Portrait or JJ as well, Akinlade, we are just surrounded by a lot of incredible artists, and that's why I like. We don't have to look too far to see like crazy talented people who can inspire you today.
Yeah, our friend Lorenzo Kello says we're surrounded by legends daily.
Yeah, that's really what I think.
I will use my Peruvian accent to ask our audience to give a big round of applause for our speakers. Thank you. Are you leaving as well? Are you open to some questions from our audience if we have some time? If someone has a question? Gregorio?
I'd like to know how have you perceived the changes of playing music, collective music, collaborative music that you made before COVID and after COVID? Not only because the lockdown, but because the social movements that got bigger at that time, during that time.
So your question is, how has making co-collaborative music changed before and after lockdown? I think people took it for granted a bit more before lockdown. I can remember the feeling of the audience being a bit more consumative before lockdown. It's not a nice feeling, and it leaves you feeling a bit more drained as well. And that's part of why we would like to get the audience involved, and at least energetically in music creation. And then I feel like people are more grateful now, and at least the spaces that I'm a part of, they're more ready to come for what we have to give them. They're more ready to be uplifted, and they're not coming for just a distraction. For me, that's the way things have changed.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It was really great to hear your perspective and stories, and I really want to come to the jam now. I was just wondering, I started a musician society with some friends of mine at SOAS, and we've started putting on jams. This is the first time we've done it, and I've noticed lots of challenges like you spoke about in terms of navigating, being musicians and being kind of behind the scenes and in the spotlight, and how to create an atmosphere for people to listen to each other and not just kind of go on stage and show their stuff, but really interact. And I guess I was just wondering, you spoke a bit about having that balance and structure between giving people freedom and still keeping things kind of tight. If you could just share a bit how you do that.
How to keep the balance of allowing people to express and make mistakes whilst keeping things tight and presentable is what you're asking?
Yeah. Well, as a jam, that it doesn't get too chaotic.
Okay.
How do you take that?
Number one is listening and making sure that everyone listens. Quite often, even just as we come into this room, most of the stuff we do, we're creating a culture. We kind of often think that we're just in this culture and we have to fit into it. But we all come with our own culture. So when we're creating a space, we are co-creating this culture together. So just bearing that in mind will make our actions a lot more conscious and our choices more conscious. So that's something to bear in mind. We're co-creating culture. So that means we're co-creating a culture of listening. Second, I'm going to quote Lorenzo Keller again. He said that all of our mistakes are not really mistakes when given context, and it's the context which provides the song. And he was talking about improvising, piano playing, but obviously being Lorenzo Keller is for life, isn't it? So there's that. Mistakes are important in context. Managing expectations is really important. So one of the first rules is no promises if I'm asked to sign up. That's just because number one, there's a lot of people. Number two, I might have to pull people off or put people on. So it's to manage it, you might not have anything and then they can know. And tailoring it. So for instance, now in Ori Jam, we put first timers on in the first set. So if you're just come to space and you're new, come in the first set, and then as we get to know you and get to know where to put you, and I'm going to explain that in a minute, then you can open up the second set, which is a bit more structured, but also a bit more free, if that makes sense. something that's really important, especially with vocalists, is to make sure that they're being placed in a place like that will hold space for whatever creativity they're going to do. So if someone's got a soft voice and the band's really loud, quiet in the band. If someone's got a louder voice and got more energy, bring the band up. I often ask people, you know, what's your name? What kind of style do you do? What do you have to talk about today? What kind of style do you do? Because we don't always tell the band what they're going to do. So if something comes up and be like, okay, this person can fit in here. And what you're going to talk about today, because if they're going to collaborate, if I'm going to put people on stage, that's a good way to get numbers through, is to get people, introduce people and get them to collaborate. Then I want whatever the people are talking about to kind of resonate, you know, and that will hold the whole narrative of the night together. And that's another thing. There is always I believe that there is always a narrative. Postmodernity kind of said like there's no narrative. Modernity kind of gave us this overarching narrative that's meant to be universal, but there is always many narratives. Like there are many cultures coming into space, there are many narratives that come together to co-create one big story. Russian one, for example, different perspectives to create one story. And so a lot of what I do is just weaving together with maybe some improvised poetry or just some narration, what different people are talking about, and what that has given for the night. Yeah.
I don't, that's learnings. I had one thing on the listening, and that like is to be aware of, I guess, like just how much communication is non-verbal. So for me, a lot of the listening is also just observing people in space, how they are, their presence, energy, dynamics between, and how people are, and to create a sense of comfort. And some people just need that little extra coast, and it can be soft, it could be someone, it could be like Germane looking and just kind of being literally like an open palm. Like some of the gestures are so subtle and soft, but just people who are aware of that and have a presence and are doing that, and sometimes walking through the room and just like being like, oh, I heard you like mumbling to yourself, like, so do you sing, do you rap? And just like, it might be 4 weeks till they get on the mic, but it's just being aware and being like, this person has an itch, you know, and just doing what you need to do to coax that itch out, and it might take a month or whatever. But I think there's a lot of like that kind of soft, energetic work that, and just conversational work in a non-verbal way, that I think is a good part of the jam. And then really to have that balance, as Fred was saying earlier, like that it's the band, that is the audience and the people in conversation too. And so sometimes that conversation needs to be had with like the people listening, observing, or if people are chatting, or if they're doing a certain way, and then just be like, these are the ground rules. And mainly it's just a respect thing, to be like people that hear, improvise and expressing in a vulnerable place. So like we would want that openness and respect from like the people listening as well. So yeah, I have those two, but good answer.
Also aces and places in it, so I'm not gonna go and sit on keys and try and play. I'm not gonna go on drums, because I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as Fred or Lorenzo Keller on the keys, you know what I'm saying? I'm good at pushing words out of my mouth that somehow makes sense. So that's what I mainly do, and seeing where people go in. So that's what I do, you know? What you said about subtle is so important, because your energy is going to be drained by doing what you're doing. So whatever you can do to make your life easier is also important. And knowing that you've got a team around to catch you. So just make sure everyone's capacities, sorry, this is unsolicited advice maybe, but just make sure everyone's capacities aren't being overextended in ways that they haven't consented for and they're not fully agreeing into. Make sure everyone has been able to choose their responsibilities.
Yes.
I have a question, but I think I'm going to try to articulate it as best as I can. Watching you guys have this conversation was very, I don't know what the word is, I don't have an adjective, but it was very much akin to a lot of the conversations I've had with my friends, and the quality and the depth and the nuance of the conversations that comes out of this. My question is, do you feel pain that so much of that is so beyond you that you cannot always process, that the emotions are so high? How do you let that flow out of you? Because I am always so overwhelmed when I'm in such conversation that's so beyond me that I'm always brought to tears. Not because it's my bodily response to such depth and knowing that these ideas, these thoughts are so beyond me that I will never be able to articulate it to a lay person who is not in that moment. How do you guys deal with that? Because it is a lot. Does that make sense? I don't know if I've explained it properly, but
I think I have a sense. So is it about how we? Yeah, I guess I have a feeling as all things were coming into me in response. So maybe I'll start there, and I guess you can clarify if anything. I think I guess I say that there's two things that came to mind. One is again on an expectation and getting rid of in myself, or holding as little as possible, an expectation that it is going to be or has to be a certain way, and that there's a value in how something is felt or articulated and communicated inherently, a value beyond what you actually are feeling, you know. So I feel like if there's going to be truth within me, no matter how well I can communicate that in any given moment, and there's lots of factors outside of me which impact how I can share, communicate, or what expectation I might have on a listener, you know. And so if I remove expectation on a listener and I remove an expectation on myself to have to think, say, and be able to talk in a particular manner, then and just allow myself the humanity of being different every day, you know. And so there are times when I have just like reeled something out and I just felt like the most articulate and and other times when I can't string two words together and it's just like that's the reality. And there are times when it is just that, it's just frustration, or it's just tears, or it's, you know, and that's just the truth of it. And to learn to be more just honest with that, with where I'm at in a particular moment. And in terms of the bigger context of like the issues even and the content of what we speak and think on, I guess I've always felt this, but it's still another process of coming to terms of like what I call like scale of influence and scale of impact with regards to literally these big like isms that we're talking about, you know. And in each of us have our own scale of impact, which sometimes is just our natural speed and it can vary through our lives, but it's just what it is. And I'm a very much like a one-to-one person. Like me and Jermaine spend when we live together too, we just spend a lot of time. We listen to an album, sometimes just in silence, and then we just like talk all evening, and then that would be that. And it's like very one-to-one. A lot of my time is on walks and talks with friends. Certain settings, like I can, you know, like in a sense, I still felt like I was here with these guys, and I did feel the presence of others, but I had to just kind of like try and keep it as small in terms of my sense of scale as possible. Or if I'm performative, then I'm going to be performing and aware of that kind of context. But I've got friends too who can rally thousands of people. I've got friends who can lead marches, got friends who can campaign with organizations, got friends who are going to be in politics. I've got friends who are going to communicate what they've got to communicate in books, who can off the cuff just really find the language to inspire, just like that. And that's them, and it's more like, okay, cool, support those people in doing what they do best and support them in their scale. And sometimes I might feel like I wish this or wish that, but it's more time those same people talking to me and being like, no, like you're good at what you do and we need you there. Like, you know what I mean? Like we need the range of experience and ways. I've got friends who can't verbally articulate this kind of stuff, but I see their truth in their actions and the way they live. And for me, I value that so much more, because I also know more people who can talk, but really can't. They don't live it at all. So I think understanding that and really valuing such variety. Yeah, I think now especially just the level, the range of intelligence and knowledge that I value beyond how I would have defined those words before. Maybe that's a simple way of putting it for me. That like it's just I've got a much broader understanding of like knowledge and intelligence that really is far away from, unfortunately, the knowledge and intelligence which has been like valued and codified and that we're pushed towards in our current society.
Thanks for that answer. It helped me really understand what you were,
well, I hope
better
it was what you were
understand.
saying, I don't know.
it was kind of yes and no at the same time.
Okay, yes.
No, because I'm talking about these intimate conversations you have with people that you know produce these ideas and these thoughts that are so beyond that moment, and the feelings and the emotions that come with it. How does that translate for you? For me, for example, I just feel pain because I just feel this hurt. I feel whatever it may be, you know. But how does that translate for you, and how do you sort of process that? You know, so for example, if we were not here, if this was not a live podcast, this was a very much intimate moment between the three of you, and surely there would be some emotions there. How would you sort of process that? How would you, because knowing that it is beyond anyone, a lot of people's comprehension, beyond, it's almost like a burden. I don't know how else to explain it. That it reaches beyond that sort of capacity to sometimes hold, because you can't always. It's not. I don't know if I'm making sense. It's a bit. I feel like it's a bit more philosophical than it needs to be, but this is how I see it.
So I'm gonna wind my way in there. Modernists talk about structures of feeling. They talk about they don't really understand. I'm just saying they don't really understand. But yes, I am saying that I understand a bit more. They talk about informed naivety, for instance. That I am aware of something, but I know how much I know, but I also know how much I don't know, and that produces this structural feeling, these two layers of feelings. I'm not just informed, I'm not just naive, I'm both and, basically. And so, so that, for some reason, that brings me to feel what you're saying. I mean, I know that I've got all this stuff, but how can I know that we're having this conversation is really deep, but I also know that I'm naive enough, that I'm quite naive, that I think I could really articulate and change something, you know. It's kind of carrying both of these together. The question of how do I process the pain, I used to call things like Steam Down and Origam my spiritual warfare training and musical therapy, because that's what it was. There are moments, so there are some strange things that happen at these events. People will have the same experiences in response to the music and what it's bringing up. Think it was just me or myself, you know, me the individual, and not realize that actually most people in here were having a similar experience. A lot of the times when I'm enjoying myself at the jams, the music's really hitting a peak. It doesn't look like I'm enjoying myself. It looks like I'm in pain. It looks like I'm crying, and sometimes I'm crying. I mean, the bass bass, you know, it's that kind of, because, this is what it is again. It's not. It's adding to the dichotomy of I'm either in pain or I'm in pleasure. It's both. I'm in pain at the sheer knowledge of the human condition and the suffering that we are allowing each other to go through and perpetuating, even though we have the answers, but we're not putting them into place. So there's that suffering, and then there's also the pure joy and pleasure of the fact that how the hell have we made it so far and done so well, and we are still kind of inspired to go forward and do more, you know. And so it's carrying. So this is why I really want to stress the importance of diurnal living. It's not just some big idea up in the air of like how to live. It's like it's actually an embodied process. For me, metamodernism is all about integrating paradox and integrating cognitive dissonance. It's all about that. I don't know if you watched The Good Place, but that goes into philosophy, and it's got that part where it says, you know, everyone's going to hell because you're all sinning, because fast fashion and plastic, and, you know, it's like, of course that's the case, and that's why I'm going off. But that's why Christianity said, yo, you can be forgiven for anything you do. Just ask your forgiveness. You know what I'm saying? Ask your forgiveness of what I'm doing. Ask for strength to get better. It doesn't have to be the universe. It doesn't have to be God. It can just be to yourself. Just bear it up. And in those moments, because of the way that the cultures that we have created, these cultures, in those moments, in these spaces where the music is reaching a crescendo and everything's popping off and people are dancing, you can't help but move. In those moments, we realize that there's like this wheel that we're part of, and we're generating, and we keep on going. And even though we feel bad, we know we can co-create these moments of sheer bliss, which we can share with each other and spread and keep somewhere tucked away, you know, beyond the physical, to go out into the physical world and do what we need to do and then come back, you know. And so that's how, and yeah, I probably would be in a much worse place if I hadn't been fortunate enough to come across these spaces and people like Stephen Rudder and the Steam Down and the spaces of, you know, Buster Mantis and all these places and all these people. Yeah. Yeah. I dig.
Great question. Really good. Great answer. Great answers.
So yeah, I think we have to come to an end. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
our
thank
guests.
you.
I think one last.